Hi there. This second episode is a chat with Era Denmark. Era has her own website containing articles and monologues, and I see her as another mystic on the path, for want of better words. So why do you see Flat Earth as being more important than you originally did?
Right. So perhaps I should explain a little bit how I even came across it and my path and how it connects with my path and therefore how I perceive it or did perceive it. So people speak a lot of awakening. This is a catchword, really, a phrase that everyone uses. That I awoke at this period of time, or this thing. I'm awake now, because they tend to think that becoming aware of socioeconomic deception, or the dark unveilings, or certain dark, hidden, occult groups and their perceived agenda, because really no one that you'll see out on the net has any clue what's really going on. They think that's waking up, but in fact, it's not. That's just part of the process in general, but waking up is really an internal process. It's wholly individual and very internal. And if you're fortunate enough, your process will begin with that and not with the dark unveilings and conspiracy and whatnot, because you really have to be able to handle quite a few paradigm shifts that you'll come across, you'll go through as you evolve, as you grow.
I've said before, waking up to just deception can put you in a washing machine. A lot of people end up in this sort of washing machine and come out maybe worse for wear sometimes.
Yeah, well, they end up just changing one paradigm for another, and that's not necessarily helpful. It is, in its own way, a big distraction, because the real work is internal work. So I mentioned this. I know you asked me, why do I think Flat Earth is more important than I originally thought it was? And as you know, I'm reticent to use the term Flat Earth. I prefer cosmology or true cosmology, or perhaps more accurate cosmology, because even it's hard to even know what the absolute truth is there. We'll get to that later. Yeah. But we'll use the term Flat Earth just for ease of communication during this conversation. So because I was already, I have more than 10 years under my belt of personal evolution and growth. And this has given me mental, really an intellectual and emotional flexibility that allows me to transition between paradigms and thought streams quite easily. So someone sent me an interview with one of these, should I call them flat earthers?
Yeah, for ease of conversation.
Okay, from one of these flat earthers. And he just said, okay, don't go weird, but just look at this and consider how easy it is to mold and shape perception. I thought, okay, well, fine, I'm going to look at it. So I listened to this interview with this flat earther. And as I was listening to it, I mean, I appreciate someone who presents a rational argument. And he was doing very well at that, presenting his argument for Flat Earth. And I was already aware of NASA's deception, things that are very obvious. So I have no doubts about that. So as I listened to it, I noticed something in myself, and this is, I think, because of years of experience with meditation. I'm aware of my internal reactions to things. So I noticed as I was listening to him, I had a kind of cognitive dissonance. On one hand, he appealed both to my rational mind and my irrational mind. I felt there was something to look at there more. On the other hand, it seemed so absurd that I was tempted to dismiss it. Now, there's a logical fallacy called appeal to stone. And appeal to stone is when you dismiss something as absurd without demonstrating why it's absurd.
This is very big with the globe earthers, people clinging to the globe at the moment.
And they fall back on another logical fallacy, which is appeal to authority. So here's the deal. I've never flown off the earth physically 20 miles up to look back and see what shape the earth has. And although I have some astral sight, I've never seen it fully from the astral. We can talk about what I have seen later, but because I've never flown 20 miles off the earth, off the surface of the earth, and looked back at it, I don't know if it's a globe or if it's flat.
You don't know through direct experience.
I don't know. So I have a choice. I could either appeal to authority, which would be a logical fallacy, and which is a tendency of humanity in general, which is why empire so easily rules and subdues us. Or I could sit back and say, okay, let's admit I don't know, and that everything I think I know has been presented to me through various authorities. They call
filters
them,
and veils.
yes, exactly. Science, education, and whatnot. The media,
Group
imagery, yes. So I don't know. Now, if I just jump though to the very next conclusion, well, everything I've been taught is a lie, therefore it must be flat. That's also flawed.
There are many people who've done
reasoning.
that.
Yes,
like 9/11's a hoax. This is a hoax. So this is another one. It's like a conspiracy conveyor belt for some people.
Yeah, it is, and that is really, that's a distraction that is very unfortunate because it keeps you off your path. It keeps you off the path and leads to a lot of heartache and distortion and confusion
and internet addiction.
Yes, and a whole lot of dogma, basically dogma searching, because it's almost like, well, people have one dogma has fallen to the wayside. It doesn't hold water anymore, and they just go look for another one. So I'm really, I currently, I do think so. My choice was, I said, okay, well, I'm not going to appeal to authority on this. I cannot fly physically off the earth.
Yeah.
What I can do is start practicing more with my astral sight to look at it from an astral perspective, but that is not physical, so it's going to be different, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But I'm here in the physical realm with the ability to observe, document, and contemplate. And so there is natural phenomena that I can observe, like the way water always finds its flat level.
Horizon
and the lack
rising
of
to the eye
the
level.
lack of curvature and other things. They're clues to things, but I'm not going to fall in the trap of becoming a flat earther. What I'm interested in is, why is this happening now? And so what I did is I sat there, I listened to this guy, he spoke, and at first, I like I said, I was very tempted to just say it's absurd, and I actually wrote back to my friend and I said, okay, I have to think about this, but really what I'm thinking is this guy is saying everything he's ever been taught is a lie, so the earth must be flat. I call that flat brain logic, and I kind of made a joke.
Yeah.
But then I sat there for about 2 hours really processing this cognitive dissonance, and I thought, wait a minute, no, something else is going on here. What this is about, this is not actually about the shape of the earth, although that is very interesting, valid point. It's about mankind's perception of their place in the universe.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
because
what it's about.
The universe, as we know, is a macro, as above, so below, the microcosm and the macrocosm. And the Kabbalah and Kalachakra Tantra both show this, that our cosmology in the universe is the same as our cosmology within each human.
Right. Well, so this is why I think it is more important. And someone I was talking to about it, he kind of dismissed it. I mean, he sees it's valid, it's legitimate, but he dismissed that, well, it's silly because
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. But actually, what I said to him is that there's a bridge. I know you wanted to quote something from an email I wrote you.
We've been speaking for a while, and on one email, you said flat Earth is like a bridge between two paradigms. It can take a human from one extreme to another.
Right.
So it can take a human from deep in the Matrix, 9 to 5, loving Fox News, straight away to the whole system is a fraud. So it's very powerful in that regard.
Yeah, it's also a little bit dangerous because you need normally, with such drastic paradigm shifts, normally society would be structured around tribes and local shamans or wise elders to help people
slowly
deal with any kind of transition when when you discover reality is not exactly what you think it is. But basically,
slow increments is usually the way.
Yeah, but we don't have this, and so you get a lot of people just kind of losing their minds because they don't have a foundation yet set. You need a spiritual foundation. You need to already have been doing your own work. And if you just come into this kind of thing with no preparation, no internal, spiritual, intellectual, emotional support, that's going to be a problem. But the reason to finally answer your question, the reason that this could be important is that if humans are to break the spell of randomness, there's a spell of randomness and insignificance that's been cast on us by scientific materialism, the Copernicus model,
Yeah.
Darwinism, then it's absolutely necessary for us to come to a reasonable world conception, or cosmology, basically.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big trap where everyone's talking about the Earth's flat, the Earth's flat, the Earth's flat. Yeah, it is. It acts flat and it feels flat. But people aren't really looking at, hey, we don't know our cosmology. And that's why I spent my own time and money going to India and studying what's the Vedic cosmology. People are still shouting about curvature, and they're shouting about this and that, and they're still arguing with a lot of ball earthers, should we say, for ease of conversation. So people aren't really recognising we've woken up to we don't know much. They're like, oh, we know the Earth's flat, but actually what people have woken up to, we don't know our cosmology.
Exactly.
It's not really a positive, we've woken up to flat Earth. Yeah, it's a positive, but it's also, there's a lot missing. It's like we've woken up to we don't know hardly anything.
Right. And how do we find out? And how do we evolve as a species? So truth is not something that you can put in a book. Both truth and love are extensions of the same thing, and they originate from the same place. Let's say that's home, our spiritual homes. And we're here having this experience in the physical. But the vast majority of humankind has been born into everyone uses the term matrix, but let's say born into a system of control and perception modeling. Perception, what's the word I want to use? Perception. Mind control, perception control, really.
Yeah.
From the time they're born, they're conditioned. And they go through their life feeling this sense of separation and inner discontent and discord and not knowing why. And this is why it's good to find, if you have nothing else, find a tradition that supports you in your evolution, your awakening, and understand that it's an internal process. Don't treat the tradition as the be-all, end-all. Taoism, for instance, is a very good, helpful tradition. It is not it. Everybody's looking for it, the one thing that's going to be the modality that's going to be everything to them.
I'm a Reiki healer, and that's what I am.
Right,
everyone's
exactly.
looking to pigeonhole themselves.
I'm Buddhist, I'm Taoist, I'm this. Understand that
or
these
I'm
are
a
all
9/11 truther.
Exactly. These are all, I heard somebody refer to this as ports of call, and I thought that's such a great analogy or metaphor.
Like the boat on the ocean.
That's what, well, I expanded on it. She just referred to the New Age, for instance, being a port of call. And I thought that's such a great metaphor. You could create an analogy with this if you expand it as such. So this is what it means to journey, to be on the path of discovery. Imagine that you're on a sailboat and you're on a strait. So you're surrounded by land on three sides, behind you and on each side. And out in front of you is eventually the open ocean. And as you sail your boat along, you see many ports of call.
Shiny lights.
There's the New Age port of call. You stop there. You get to talk to people a lot. There's the dark unveilings port of call.
Drinking green sludge.
Yeah. Lots of kale smoothies. Yeah. I like those. I like kale smoothies. Just teasing. Yeah. But there's a dark unveilings port of call where you can stop and learn about conspiracies or various
Yoga,
things.
Qigong, port of call.
Yeah, there's that. There's the philosophy port of call.
Yeah.
There's
psychology.
There's many.
Inner shadow.
The problem is that people stop at these ports of call and stay there.
Yeah.
Or they pendle between two or
three. One or two. Yeah.
But our journey here, exactly. Our purpose here is to get off, look around, interact,
move on,
go to the next, whatever, or pass one by if you want. Keep sailing out
to the horizon.
Keep going towards the sun.
Yeah, and Flat Earth is a big port of call. It's busy there. There's a lot of bars and a den of thieves. It's a really big port of call, and a lot of people who have been on the path or not on the path for a while have definitely jumped into this Flat Earth port of call. And they're building houses there. They're like, this is where I'm going to be.
Right. Well, there's a reason for this. People search for security. And again, if you don't have a foundation, if you don't have a teacher, a helper, I'm not talking about gurus.
A guide.
So even if it's your internal compass, really. If you don't have that, people just tend to feel like they're blowing in the wind and they're looking for a sense of security. And so they're drawn to anything, groups,
unity,
hive mind,
belonging.
Unity. Yes, absolutely.
It's a human thing. It's not, we're not saying that's bad. We're not being critical of that. It's natural.
Yeah.
So, Era, what do you think about these flat earthers trying to solve the map and cosmology with only rational mind?
Right. So Rudolf Steiner was a engineer, mathematician, philosopher, and mystic.
Kabbalist as well,
yeah, that lived in the early part of the 20th century. I think he was Hungarian, and then he lived in Germany and perhaps Switzerland. I'll have to double check that. He made some really interesting comments about the Copernicus. And actually, to go back to what we were talking about before, I knew about Rudolf Steiner's views on the Copernicus model and that cosmology, the
the flat Earth.
Yes, I knew about it already, and I'd always wondered about it a little bit. So I had that in mind when I first encountered the flat Earth information or group of people and their work and whatnot. So I went back to it again to look at it with different eyes. And here I have something here I could read if it's okay. Yeah. So in 1912, Rudolf Steiner gave one of his discourses, and he talked about the Copernican model, and this is what he said. He said, anyone who asks from the standpoint of occultism, which just means hidden knowledge, what kind of world conception can be derived from the Copernican tenets, will have to admit that although these ideas can lead to great achievements in the realm of natural science and external life in the physical, they are incapable of promoting any understanding of the spiritual foundations of the world. For there has never been a worse instrument for understanding the spiritual foundations of the world than the ideas of Copernicus. Never in the whole of human evolution.
Wow.
That's a pretty strong indictment.
It's not taught at schools, that's for sure.
Right. And he goes on to say, the reason is that all these Copernican concepts... Okay, let me clarify something first before I continue reading. Everyone seems to have their own narrative or reality tunnel, and they have their way of conceding of natural phenomenon and force and principles. So when, and they often will use like anthropomorphization, entities, names, and titles to describe a concept, not an actual being or a person. So what I'm going to read next, he uses the term Lucifer. Do not think that he's actually referring...
People are going to get biblical.
Yeah.
People are going to go all biblical on this.
He's not referring to an actual individual person or consciousness of any type. He's talking about a concept. The spiritual truths are actually completely abstract, and for humans to understand and work with them, we have always anthropomorphized these concepts.
Was it Josephine McCarthy said, putting all these entities and spirits into good or bad, heaven and hell, is a bit like a video game for idiots?
Yes, and there's another level that even to understand that what we are calling entities and spirits and beings could at some level be that, but at another level they're not at all. They are principles, cosmic principles. So you really need to think with abstract, you need to understand abstract thought, at least be able to think with So let me just continue. So he went on to say, the reason is that all of these Copernican concepts are inspired by Lucifer. Again, don't think of a person, think of a principle. Copernicanism is one of the last great attacks made by Lucifer upon the evolution of man. In earlier pre-Copernican thought, the external world was indeed Maya, illusion. But much traditional wisdom, much truth concerning the world and the things of the world still survived. Since Copernicus, however, man has illusion around him, not only in his material perceptions, but his concepts and ideas are themselves illusionary. Mankind take it for granted nowadays that the sun is firmly fixed in the middle of the planets, and these planets revolve around it. But in the near future, it will be realized that the view of the world held by the school of Copernicus and Kepler is very convenient, but as an explanation of the macrocosm, it is not the truth.
I think on email we were talking and we were saying humanity is not good at understanding abstract realities.
Yes.
And you said they long for the nuts and bolts, especially the male mind. Mm-hmm. And Flat Earth sort of helps give these people room to adjust to the mystery. Even though a lot of these flat earthers aren't adjusting to the mystery, they're still in, I need to know the map, I need to know what the stars are. Yeah. They're still seeing it as a very physical problem, a physical subject.
Yeah.
But all these great mystics have said it's not a physical problem.
Exactly.
I'd like to quote from the Sri Ram Bhagavatam, in chapter 5.16.4, it says, "No one can explain our cosmology perfectly. No one in the material world is perfect, and an imperfect person can't describe this material universe accurately, even after continual speculation." And this was written thousands of years ago.
Right.
And these sort of mystics and these sort of scriptures are being ignored.
Right.
But people are waving around the Bible. I'm not trying to diss the Bible. There's some beautiful things in there. People are waving around the Bible saying it's flat, it's flat, it's flat.
Right.
But not understanding that it's a very mystical reality.
Yes, this is a mystery here. So anybody looking at this flat Earth, understand that this is just a clue. It's not the answer. It's a clue to the greater mystery.
It's a stepping stone.
Yeah.
It's a port along the way.
Yeah.
So what's happening is 99% of flat earthers are getting caught up in trying to define the cosmology in physical terms. And these people probably won't ever get it. They're going to be like a hamster on a wheel.
Exactly. And that's what Rudolf Steiner was saying. You can't understand it. So basically, to understand this, you need to develop not only your spiritual foundations and do your own housework, house cleaning on yourself. You need to understand that what we perceive one way in the physical looks very different in the astral.
Yes.
So Rudolf Steiner pointed out that in the physical, you could in some way perceive that the Earth seems to go around the sun. You could also perceive it another way and say, no, it doesn't. The sun goes around the Earth. He said, yes, because you're trying to understand, it's going to be confusing. You're trying to figure it out in material physical terms. But from the astral, he said, when you look at the Earth from the astral, it's geocentric. The Earth is at the center. So again, you need to be able to there's a marriage of rational and irrational.
Yeah, and also in the astral, different people will see it differently.
Right.
Because they'll be in a different part of the astral plane, and some people in the astral will bring their subconscious images into play.
Absolutely. The astral is not a reliable...
It's not a science, rational place.
Yeah, absolutely not. There's so much overlay and projection happening there.
But this is another thing you said, Era, which I liked, and I made a note of this. You said if we could understand everything about how realities work, there would be no mystery. And without mystery, there is no awe. Without awe, there is no imagination. And without imagination, there is no creation. And without creation, there can be no God.
Yeah.
So, Era, what do you think of these people who never revel in the mystery? And let me elaborate a little bit. There are many people at the moment, many millions really, especially males, who think they know everything. They're actually walking around thinking they rationally know everything. They know why they're here, Big Bang, Darwinism. They're really worshipping science. And they seriously think they have a logical, rational, physical answer for every single question that could throw at them. So there are these humans who never once revel in the mystery. They would actually laugh and scorn at the word mystery. They would associate it to Scooby-Doo or something. So what's your view on these people who think they know everything?
Well, I think they're children. So I have a website, and on my website, in one of my essays, I say that the world is full of spiritual 4-year-olds. And if you doubt it, just look around. Just look around, take a good look. I have compassion for them. I view them the same way I viewed my son when he was a 4-year-old and believed in Santa Claus. I told him the truth, actually, that, it's just like Mickey Mouse. You don't have to believe. Mickey Mouse doesn't have to be real for you to have fun with the idea of Mickey Mouse and to play with toys. And Santa Claus doesn't have to be real for you to enjoy getting presents that your mom puts under the tree. I mean, he knew the truth. Actually, I got in trouble from other parents because he went to school and told the kids there's no Santa Claus, right? Because I wasn't going to teach him that Santa Claus was real.
Sure,
to me, children have wonderful imaginations. You can tell them he's not real. We're just going to pretend he is. And kids totally get that.
Yeah.
But what's so funny is you look at all these adults in the world that think they know everything. It's just like that. They're pretending it's real. They're pretending something is real.
And they don't know. They don't really know.
They don't. So I have compassion for them. I sometimes feel sorry for them, and I don't mean that in a condescending way. But I also don't waste my time on that.
I find these people very serious. As I was waking up to flat Earth, for want of better words, I went to actually see some scientists to talk about re-entry from space and how satellites get into orbit. And because they couldn't answer these questions, they got very, very angry and insulting. And these are professional
Yeah, they get
scientists.
backed in a corner. It's very difficult for them. But a lot of people, most people don't realize how, I'm doing air quotes here, I know people can't see it, how science really works. The way it really works, if you study the history of the various scientific discoveries or scientific theories, it works like this. Some guy in 1710, he comes up with a theory on how something works. 20 years later, another scientist looks at his theory, treats it as fact, and builds another theory on top of that theory as if it's fact. This is a snowball effect that just leads to massive ignorance. It's a big, huge snowball. And maybe that's why they think they live on a globe, because it's really a big snowball of stupidity. But yeah, that's how science works. When I was in school, I wasn't disruptive. No, I didn't misbehave, but I was a disruption for some of my teachers because I would challenge.
Oh, it was horrific.
Yeah, and they didn't have when I was in elementary school. They didn't yet have the so advanced. What did they used to call it? They called us advanced students. I forget that they had a terminology for it. I'm blanking right now. But when I was in elementary school, they didn't have that at the school. They didn't know what to do with me. So what they would do is pull me out of class, and one of the teachers, I had a teacher dedicated just for me that would let me just learn whatever I wanted to learn about because I was always further along than the class. And I really think having this unstructured learning environment given to me just a couple hours a week within this structured environment
super helps.
Was very helpful.
It's very Montessori.
Yeah, but I never went to a Montessori school. My parents kept me in public school. My mother was a school teacher. My stepfather was a chemist and a school teacher for a while. So I grew up around academia, and I got to see how they think and how they behave, and they're like robots. They do not think for themselves.
Yeah, they give them books.
My teachers either loved me or hated me. So when I occasionally was lucky enough to have a teacher that was open-minded and was actually a thinker, they loved me. Even though they may challenge me, they allowed me room for thought and discussion. But most of my teachers just shut me down and either
here's a book. Remember it.
Yeah,
remember
absolutely.
It, remember it.
And this is how millions of people are being educated. Yeah. So the scientific community and academia, they're a bunch of unthinking robots. Or when they do think, it's hyper rational, and yet without the right foundation, it ends up not even being rational. It's so far removed from reality.
So much air energy with complete lack of earth or water.
Right.
It's just super air.
Well, and a lot of fire too. Yeah. A lot of fire too,
That's
which leads to dogma.
Water,
yeah.
For sure. It's air and fire.
Yeah.
The whole academic world, universities and things, is very air and fire. Yes. But things like the flat earth information, the flat earth awakening within people, the flat earth paradigm shift, whatever you want to call it, is very earth and water.
Yeah. Well, and it's also the academia and the scientific community is very masculine. And I don't say that in any way to insult masculine energy. And I think people have a tendency when you hear someone talking about the masculine and the feminine to identify with one of those principles based on their current gender. It's very important to realize that
or their current relationship.
Yes, you are currently experiencing reality through a vessel that is configured either in masculine or masculine or feminine, but you have both within you. So it's not a critique of one of those principles.
We all have the same amount of
I'm not critiquing. I'm not criticizing the masculine principle, but without balance, just like too much feminine leads to too much irrational. We live in a physical world, so you need both together.
But the science community is not, there's too many men in it, human vessels.
No, even the women are hyper masculinized.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the information's displayed very masculine.
Yes. Yeah.
What do you think of these people who are going around sort of thinking they know everything? And I see it as quite toxic, and like these people need healing. They're walking around thinking they know everything. Do you think this leads on to the idea of some of these people with these sort of levels of toxicity are soulless or have had their souls eaten by some astral parasites?
Right, that's a big question. This is conjecture, okay? I can't say that I know anything to be 100% absolutely true. So please take my words with a grain of salt. But the idea that everyone has a soul and we're all divine and we all going to the same place after death is a new age idea. Most people do not realize that is not the ancient teachings. That is not what you learn in the mystery schools.
Totally.
And if you look around in the world, you have to ask yourself, do you really think you're living in a world with a lot of divine beings here? Do you think that? Or do you think could be something else going on?
Just walk around a shopping centre on a Saturday.
Yeah. There are some teachings. I'm not going to say that I believe these 100%. I just consider them, okay? I take them into consideration and I observe. There are teachings that say that not everyone has a soul, that there are clay people. If you look at the Gnostic teachings, you have the pneumatics, the psychics, and the hylics. And the pneumatics are the spirit-imbued humans. The psychics are the humans that are developing a soul or have a soul. It's in the process of development, and they are reincarnating. And then you have the hylics, which are like what the Bible calls clay men, men of clay.
In Kabbalah, the realm of Malchut could be interpreted by some. It has been interpreted by some writers as being clay people.
Yeah.
With very little going on inside in the realms of soul.
That doesn't make them any better or worse. So, someone I know was talking about that character on Star Trek that's like the android or something.
Yeah, Data.
Yes. No, Data doesn't have a soul, but that doesn't make him any less.
He's still cool.
Valid and valid. Right. Exactly. So it's definitely not a judgment. It's just, to embody truth, we have to be willing to think differently. We have to be willing to put aside emotional knee-jerk reactions to certain concepts and ideas.
Yeah.
Now, when I first learned of this and began to investigate it, I just thought that's a very dangerous idea. Because
it can create elitism.
It can create elitism. It appeals to ego.
Yes.
And it can also create fanaticism. Imagine if the radical Muslims in the Middle East had the idea that no one else but them have souls. Well, kind of they do, don't they?
They kind of,
and
there
look
are
what
passages
happens.
in the
And look what
Quran
happens.
that can be construed like that,
yeah,
for sure.
And look what happens. So, however, that doesn't mean it's not truth, but it just means this is why certain truths are hidden in the occult and kept that way. It's not
dangerous in the wrong hands.
Yes, absolutely, and dangerous among masses of humans that are not evolved enough to handle it.
With a bonding ideology.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of inner distortion and pain and problem, so
social suppression.
Yeah, it's very dangerous. So
people could look up things like organic portals.
I think organic portals.
Yeah, this is another.
Look up Reed Gurdjieff.
Yeah.
What did Gurdjieff say about that? He said there are people going around that they're dead on the inside, and he said it's a good thing that you cannot see that with your third eye, because if you could, you would go mad at how many dead, soulless people there are in the world.
This is also leads on, we could probably speak for hours on it, on the New Age idea of oneness. Yes, everything is interconnected, but we're all super unique. We're all massively unique universes. Right. Like if you meet someone for the first time and spend time with them, everyone's so different, and it's so beautiful and so defining.
Yeah. So
this New Age gang saying, everyone's got a beautiful divine soul, it's all one. I would say this is a massive CIA trap.
It is. It's a tool. It's leading to collectivism. So if you want collectivism to work, you need to develop a kind of new religion for spiritually inclined people.
Yeah.
You can't just go out, and this is what they figured out. They said we can't just go out and by force everyone to live the way we want them to live. There are people that have innate spiritual longing. We need to appeal to that. Here's the New Age. Collectivism. Everyone's the same. Everyone's equal.
Yeah.
But an equality.
Send love to the person who's being evil.
Right.
Like the guy with the axe at the bottom of the road killing all your children. Just send him love.
But see, this kind of collectivism, it completely denies the divine, beautiful individuality of every person here, with or without a soul. Okay, so it was French author Jean Mercal. He said the unity of human thought would be an impoverishment of human thought. And basically, he studied and was a scholar of the Druids, and a lot of people don't really understand that know that our traditions in the West were very individualistic, whereas what we see coming from the East were more collectivist.
True.
Yeah. But the New Age really is a decoy, because the concept is of one single universal tradition, and you can't have individuality and human beings on their individual paths
the herd will pull them back in the pen.
Yeah, with just one universal tradition. So basically, when you look at the Druids and what our European ancestors believed, for them, God and the world, the universe, were in a state of perpetual becoming. And it's up to each individual person in each tribe, which is an organically occurring collective, not one that's created by empire. It's organically occurring where people that resonate, you have tribes, nations, really races, they come together. It's organically because they're created by a natural magnetism to each other. And then through their work together, they bring something into the world. It is both individual and collective at the same time.
I think it's good to talk about this because a lot of people there's a lot of people out there who are new, just starting to be on the path because they've just woken up to flat Earth, and they're starting to look out there. What can help me stabilize? What can give me spirituality? And a lot of people will jump into the New Age because that's what's in the shop window everywhere.
Right. Well, the New Age movement is really an example of this syncretism, extreme syncretism. So they have lots of wild theories that people accept as fact. And these basically lead to all sorts of, it's like a springboard for all sorts of fantastical conjecture and fantasy. And one of those fantasies is everyone's, I'm a soul being. I came from this Palladian.
I chose my parents. Yeah. I chose where to come to. Right. You all chose your sister. It's craziness.
Right. Yeah.
And I would say from doing, years ago, I did many years of studying esoteric and mystical scripture. I would say to anyone who's interested in spiritual knowledge or knowledge about evolution of the soul is to go to books that are around between 50 years old and older. Like anything in the last 50 years, exactly. I wouldn't trust any of those books.
Yeah.
And if I go around someone's house who's like, in the New Age or a therapist or something like this, there's oftentimes the same group of books. There's the Eckhart Tolle, there's these same New Age guides, and there's a hand push behind them. These guys are pushed, so they're in your face, these guys.
They wouldn't be so well known without it.
You don't get to be a worldwide New Age guru without a helping hand.
Exactly. On the other end of the spectrum, you have this syncretism and New Age on one side, and then what happens here is polarization. So the name of the game here with the controllers is polarization. If you can keep people polarized on extremes, always fighting against each other, left, right,
divide and conquer.
Yes, spiritual, rational materialism. You divide and conquer and ultimately homogenize. But so the other end of the spectrum, you have this scientific materialism, and that dismisses the spiritual nature of existence as something that's outdated, like a superstitious notion. And it basically, we see this, it reduces man to a biological machine. And for these proponents of this materialism, science for them is replacing the individual quest with another collectivist ideology. It's a collective controlled quest to dominate nature. And basically, any free-thinking men or women who engage in explorations outside the lines of these approved scientific tenets are quickly blacklisted by the self-appointed guardians of science and reason.
What I've done on my path is read books that I've been interested in, and I've never even spoken to anyone about some of the books I've read. I'm a bit of a hermit anyway. I'm happy to read certain books that are very specialized and deep within a certain tradition. I don't need to do them in a group or go to a course, or there's a lot of people who need to be on a course or with friends with them. The journey on the path it's an individual path.
Yeah. Well, another very important thing that I know from talking to you that you also realize is that true knowledge is never in a book, because true knowledge is experiential. So these books, even with great knowledge, if you read anything, Hermetic text, for instance, it's the finger pointing to the moon.
Sure.
So you understand the need for experiential knowing, and you don't get that from books. But books are a great, I love books.
A master once said to me, they're petrol in the car, they're gasoline, but you've got to drive the car.
Yeah. You can't go to, I used to be addicted to my books. I've literally read thousands of books. I once lived in an apartment in Paris that was 20 square meters, and I had about 600 books lined floor to ceiling on every subject. I inherited them with the apartment. They didn't belong to me. Every subject. So
sometimes we can find identity through our bookshelves.
Well, just if you're a curious person and you're trying to understand the world, and well, this is not all adding up, and you're looking for truth, naturally you'll gravitate towards that. But then you need to understand, and I did organically understand from that I needed to explore spiritually and go into the inner worlds and gather experience.
For instance, with one book, The Cepheid Zero, once I did a 16-day, I went up a mountain in Central America and took the Cepheid Zero with me and did a 16-day silent fast with that book. And it's only a 10-page book. It's a 10-page riddle. So I used to like working with books like that. What is the magic? What is the real knowledge in this book? Because a lot of books aren't to be understood with mind. They're not to be understood with rational. They're appealing to, you've got to be in an altered state or a very pure state to really get the message of certain books.
Absolutely.
And I don't know of any New Age book that works like that.
No.
They're like, step 1, do this. Step 2, be nice to everyone.
Self-help
step
books,
3,
basically. And it's just, there is some value to some of them because they're basically emotional intelligence. So they're teaching emotional intelligence, which so many people need help with. There are some writers, I wouldn't even call her New Age, like Byron Katie. She's just an expert at emotional intelligence. But this is key. If you look at her life, she came to this knowing experientially. And then she just found a way to organize and structure her thoughts and ideas and methods for improving her level of emotional intelligence. And she wrote a book, and then it's very helpful to people. Again, I wouldn't say that's New Age, but there is some value in some of the New Age work because it focuses on emotional intelligence. The problem is all of the narrative and fantasy and conjecture and the fact that the New Age is basically guided by the CIA.
Yeah.
Little bit of a red flag there.
Okay, going back on to, we touched on it earlier, the path of awakening. We sort of talked about it a little bit. There's a lot of people saying, I'm awake. The word awakening just means something different to every single human. When someone says, I'm awake, it means something different to me, to someone else. So someone in an American high school will say, I'm awake because they worked out 9/11 isn't official. Well, what would you say about this?
Right. So here's a question for you. If you think that you're awake because you're aware of certain deceptions, consider this. However much you think you know about said deception, there is a group of people on the earth that not only know about the deception, they conceived of it, constructed it, and implemented it. Would you say they're awake? Human beings? No. And they know a lot more about this conspiracy than you do. So being awake is not knowing about conspiracy or deception. Being awake is not eating a vegan diet or having dogmatic beliefs about the way people should think or behave.
Isn't it about looking really hot at a yoga class?
It's about no modality, no matter what. That's not being awake. In fact, I wish we would just get rid of that term altogether because it's a misnomer. But if we're going to use it, let's say that being awake is having a level of awareness that you are a being on a sacred path. And being awake is not only being aware of that sacred path, but being willing to pick up the mantle and walk that path.
Yeah, like the boat going to the horizon.
Yeah, right. And you have to be, you need courage. You need to be brave because although you can meet other people on the path who will lend support. It's great to have that fellowship. The path is still somewhat lonely. You do it on your own. You're born alone. You die alone, but you're not really alone, right?
Yes, you're never alone.
You're never. So it's all truths are paradoxical.
People who say they're awake, I mean, I prefer the term like you do, on the path.
Yeah.
You can see how well you're doing on the path by what the reality is giving you. How are my relationships?
Yes.
How are my life logistics?
Right.
Like, is everything messy? Have I got loads of bills and horrible letters coming through my letterbox? Bad relationships, issues with my parents, issues with my offspring. How is the mirror coming back to you? How is your emotional state?
Right.
Are you an emotional mess? Are you up and down?
Right.
How balanced are you? So basically, you know where you're at on the path, not by how many deceptions you can list. Oh, Sandy Hook, 9/11, Flat Earth, NASA. Have you seen this, what NASA did last week? It's about the reality, what the reality is giving back to you like a mirror. That's where you know where you're at.
The external is a reflection of the internal. So your external circumstances are absolutely a reflection of your internal attainment. So look at your relationships, look at your thoughts and belief patterns, your behavior, all your baggage. Yeah, your health, absolutely. And understand that don't fall in the trap of looking for another modality to fix things. It's energetic. And I don't mind sharing a personal anecdote with you. So from my life, just to give you an example, again, I've been on my path for over 10 years. And I have resolved in this time, even up to, let's say, already 6 years ago, 4 years in, I had resolved all of my relationships with my family, had done a lot of processing of pain from my past, from my childhood. I was raised in a very fundamentalist Christian religion.
Wasn't everyone in America raised in a...
Oh my goodness, it seems that way, doesn't it? It does seem that way. But it was an extra fundamental religion. And I don't mind saying they were Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
And I left when I was 18, but it scars your soul a little bit to grow up with that. So I had to, part of my path was to process all of that. So yes, so I had done a lot of healing, and my life completely transformed on the external. Not only were all my relationships transformed, I drew to me a certain type of person. I found that I lived with a lot more peace, in abundance. I have everything I could want. I have a wonderful husband, wonderful home in the countryside. Nothing wrong in my life whatsoever, truly, except I was having health issues. And I racked my brain and I was looking at modalities and trying to figure out what's going on. I started developing autoimmune symptoms. And I tried different foods and ways of eating and essential oils and everything. I won't list what I tried, but it was a lot. And then finally I was sitting in my garden one day and I was reading some Franz Barden, who was a German magician.
I've worked with some of his books. Amazing guy. If people haven't heard of Franz Barden.
Yeah, look him up.
Super wise.
So I was sitting there and I thought, this is about the elements, not external to me, but my inner element, how the elements within my being, their balance and how they relate to each other. I'm like, okay, how can I figure this out? I'm not going to find any kind of cure somewhere outside of myself. What can I do? And then someone said to me, this friend said, I at one time was having also some autoimmune issues, and a doctor told me that most people that are caregivers develop very often, not most people, I think he said very often, people that are caregivers develop autoimmune. And this person said, well, I'm not a caregiver. It's what they said to their doctor, and the doctor said, aren't you? And I assume this doctor knew this person's personal life a little bit. Anyway, he took that to heart and changed his circumstances, and all that went away. And that really drove home to me that this really is energetic. And so I started to look at my life, look at my relationships even deeper. And there was one relationship in my life where I thought it was perfect because it was someone very close to me in my family who I've always been the kind of big sister.
Most health issues are emotional.
Yeah, and taken care of this person and looked after them. And so I would have never said a year before that I'd be willing to cut any cords there or do anything because I thought that's a great relationship. But actually, it wasn't so great for me energetically. It's like Carlos Castaneda said. He said, impeccability is nothing more than the proper management of energy. And I realized, okay, even when something looks good in a relationship, it's not always, if you're holding space for other people, if you're accommodating other people on a regular basis,
you're taking energetic hit.
You're losing energy. You're just bleeding it out.
Yeah.
And so people your people that listen to you, I'm going to say followers, that's not right. The people that listen to your work, your videos and read your blog and whatnot, they'll know that you also have worked, you're very aware, and you've worked with your own energy and you're right about that.
Long retreats and in mystery school conditions.
And your relationships too. And I think the people that are listening to you because of their interest in flat earth may also begin having some problems with their relationships because of that.
I actually have quite a few flat earthers send me messages about what's going on in their lives, and I think it's because of the Edge of Awakening documentary I did. I made it more human and more what's going on inside a human. So I've had a lot of emails of people splitting up with people, can't speak to their parents, a lot of real problems going on with the flat earth. What I'd say to these people is that the path of truth is two things. It's not just YouTube, Facebook, deception. The truth about deception is only one small thing. It's about the truth of inside ourselves. Where's the deception in ourselves? Where are we lying to ourselves? Where are we being fake? Where are we creating imbalance within ourselves? But then inversely, it's a problem as well. A lot of gurus like Muji and a few others, they're out there just talking about the self, the truth about the self, but not talking about the truth of the reality we're in.
Right.
Like a lot of these gurus out there charging people haven't got a clue what's going on in the world.
So exactly. And so back to my point, just to conclude it, because it ties in perfectly with what you just said. When I realized that, and I was willing to energetically cut a cord and make a difference and change how I related to this one person and stop losing energy through this, all autoimmune symptoms, I've never come back. They went away, never come back. It's amazing. And I realized
because that
it's purely
fractal
energetic.
dissolves, the fractal dissolves, and then the cords go.
Right. So what's happening with people that are listening to all of this information about flat Earth and talking to their family about it, and then having problems in their relationships? Yes, when you do evolve, your relationships will fall away. This is completely natural. It's okay. Completely healthy. However, if you're still having emotional issues and difficulties because of the falling away of these relationships, you need to look at yourself.
Yeah.
So detach with love if you need to, but remember, don't project everything onto your loved ones. They're doing the best they can do.
Yeah.
They may not be able to handle this. They might not have the soul maturity to handle it. You don't know what's going on within them. So don't try to, I'm doing air quotes again, people. Don't try to wake them up. Let them be. Detach with love. And don't forget that your reaction to their reaction says everything about you and nothing about them.
Yeah. I find as you go through these increments of evolution along the path, it could be something like flat Earth, or it could be spending a retreat with someone, something that gives you a jump. Your vibration is going to change. And what happens is, naturally and harmonically, your friends and people around you will also change. Yeah, you'll probably keep some friends you've had since school, but some friends will fall away and some new friends will appear into your reality. It's just a mirror of your vibration.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people waking up, let's use that term for this sentence, a lot of people waking up the past year very quickly, a big jump, and they're trying to keep all the same friends they've had for years, and they're trying to impose their new beliefs and new vibration on their friends, and their friends don't like it. They're like, what's going on with you? Again,
and to go back to what we were saying earlier, are you really awake just because you know that NASA has been lying? Is that, that NASA knows they're lying? Why are you awake? Because they're not awake if they do that. So
it's not much different saying to your friends, oh, that Scooby-Doo episode the other day, it wasn't the monster, it was the caretaker.
Right.
It's not much different.
Yeah, right. And we don't know why. It's very risky to start theorizing on why people do the things they do. So just look at what you can observe that they're doing or maybe doing, but don't lose your energy on a lot of theorizing on why. You see this? I see this a lot when I looked at a lot of the flat Earth community. Is that the right term to use? Yeah, you can use flat Earth community.
You will be understood.
Okay. I see this a lot. They're doing this, and it's because of this, because they're solar cult. Actually, no, there is something, if you research,
it's the Jesuits, it's the Masons, it's this.
No, that's not. And how do you know also? You have to be willing to think differently. So when you come to this dark unveilings port of call, and you start to discover hidden dark occult technology and agendas and deception, it's very easy to go, you know what? They're doing it because they're bad guys.
They're just evil.
Yeah, they're just nasty. Evil. It's black and white. You don't know exactly what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
You don't know what they may be really trying to do. However, you do know a tree by its fruits. So just observe. But remember, bring it back home to yourself. You're on your path.
Don't have to jump into an opinion, because what I'm finding is in the online truth movement, in all its different genres, people aren't happy to revel in the mystery. People need to cling onto a branch and say, I'm with this opinion.
And they need good and evil. They always are looking. These are good guys. These are evil guys.
Because
but no.
Maybe I've spoken to a few people about this. Maybe the chemtrails are helping us. Maybe they're delaying something.
Yes, yeah. Some people think that they are delaying Earth changes.
This is something I've spoken about before on something I did, and I can't rule out. It's on the table.
Right. And there's some evidence that supports that if you look at some of the data and research that's been done on the soil deposits in California and other areas.
I think it's important to say, just because something's a deception or hidden from the masses, it doesn't necessarily mean it's evil.
Or with malice, not done with malice.
It might be done for another reason altogether.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are jumping to it's bad, it's evil, and it might not be.
Exactly.
It's just we're very low on the chessboard. We can't see a lot of what's going on.
You really need to ask yourself a few questions. You need to be willing to think differently, because whenever you see a certain stream of thought, like if you look at conspiracy theorists, they all say the same thing, right? The Illuminati do it. The Queen's evil. It's all this. They have this narrative but they don't know their ass from their heads. They're theorizing.
Most of them are working 9 to 5.
They're very big. They don't have time. And also, you're not going to know anything without spiritual sight.
Yeah.
So, again, you need to develop yourself.
And I would say on the path with this sort of awakening thing, the buzzword of awake, unless you're creating time for contemplation and creativity, we were talking about this yesterday, unless you're creating time in your life for more contemplation and more creativity and more nature, I would say you're not waking up at all, and it's a waste of time going on YouTube and going on Facebook. If there's no positive effect in your life, such as more creativity, more contemplation, more nature, there's really no point.
Exactly.
You're still in the matrix.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, and I've seen this, they're getting home from work or they're getting the kids to sleep, and they've got a few hours spare in their day, and they're jumping on YouTube and Facebook newsfeed. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like a habit. It's almost like an etheric entity is pulling them in.
Facebook is specifically designed to do that. So they've done a lot of research and development in that area. I don't work anymore, but a few years ago, I did work around certain companies that were engaged in social media platforms. And I can tell you that they design that, even the most innocent ones that are just small businesses trying to set up a social media platform to sell to big corporations or whatever.
Going for the subconscious.
Yes, absolutely, just like marketing. Yeah. So, but Facebook is especially insidious.
I know someone who said to me recently, "Oh, this person's given up Facebook for months now and feels great, but when they woke up in the morning, they'd reach for the smartphone, load up Facebook newsfeed, and they didn't know why they were doing it."
Right.
And that to me is an etheric thing going on.
Yeah, well, it's also just when you reroute the synapses in the brain, you create new behaviors, new habits. That's also just that. I mean, you have to also just understand that's how the brain works. So, routine, even without insidious motive behind it, without any insidious motive behind it, that's how humans behave. But I don't have a smartphone. I got rid of my smartphone last year. And I've done Facebook for 5 years. I have a dummy account because there's one person's page I like to check comments occasionally, like very rarely. But Facebook, if I do log into it on this dummy account to go look at this one person's page, it's amazing how what they do. They hijack your consciousness with this overload of random information, which seems random, but actually it's not so random. As we understand, they've done experiments on how to put different things in your news feed and how it affects you emotionally. And
I was talking to you yesterday about when you go on Facebook, you don't go to your safe place, your home, your wall. You automatically go to this thing called news feed, where it's very much like Clockwork Orange. You're bombarded emotionally with, depending on what sort of friends you have, I suppose, you're bombarded with truth movement stuff, maybe a cow getting shot in the head, vegan activists, truthers going crazy,
social justice warriors,
the odd baby or cat in there. In between this complete chaos, it's like someone's thrown you a bomb of information, and this isn't healthy. If you go on the internet and say, I want to research, I don't know, maybe how cows are mutilated in an abattoir, you can go and research that. Or you can go and research 9/11 or Flat Earth. It's nice, it's slow, it's at your own pace. But this news feed, it's like someone's put matchsticks in your eyes and they're bombarding you. And your subconscious doesn't like that because it can't index it very cleanly.
Right.
So it messes your vibration up. So ask yourself why Facebook takes you to the news feed instead of your homepage.
All of this, we were talking about technology yesterday. If you look at how a lot of researchers have pointed out that it's pretty evident that there is some suppressed, extremely advanced tech here on Earth. And they complain about it. They're suppressing super advanced technology from us. Well, if you look at how humans handle the technology they do have, it kind of leads you to think, well, maybe there's a reason that it's being suppressed because, I think there's some of it like free energy that should not be suppressed. It's being suppressed perhaps for, evil purposes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. But other technologies, are humans ready for it? If you look at how they handle social media, I would say no. And how they're handling smartphones and just all external technology.
Yeah, we were at the beach and there were these
no responsibilities. No responsibility.
Yeah, there was a group of youngsters, they were in their 20s.
Yeah.
We're not that old. There was a group of youngsters at the beach and, all the girls were just sitting there with their heads in the smartphone. They were at the beach in nature, beautiful day, the sounds of the ocean was great. They just got their heads in the smartphones.
Yeah. What film were we talking about yesterday? I was telling you about teleportation technology, and then I said, yeah, it would be great, but it would be awful. And you said, yeah, there's a film about
there's
that.
There's a book. It's called by Alfred Bester, a 1970s sci-fi book. It's about jaunting, where humans could go to these jaunting pads in each city and teleport to other cities around the world. And the book was about the chaos this would create.
Right.
So you're right. There's certain technologies that humanity can't handle.
Yeah, we'll get into that later. We're going to talk a little bit about the migrants in Europe. But just imagine people being able to pop anywhere they wanted at any time. Get into some place and commit a crime and then disappear.
Yeah.
Just external technology is very troublesome anyway because humans have internal technology that was active during the times of Atlantis. And we have lost. It's been taken away from us and we have lost it. And external technology only moves us further away from it, not closer.
Totally, because the Atlantean technology was more likely to have been an inner conscious-based technology.
They had some, according to seers like Rudolf Steiner, they had some, some of it was external, but you had to interface with it through your consciousness.
And with resonance.
So even if you found it today, you could not operate it via mechanical means purely. You have to...
Through my Jones, I would say certain crystals were possibly involved as well.
They found piping, for instance, that should not... piping that they can see that's been buried for thousands of years, but with certain deposits and minerals that are not... natural. They have to be created synthetically with other materials, and they're like, these shouldn't exist. But they do. And as the Roman Church spread its influence across the land, they went and gathered all of the books of our ancestors, survivors from Atlantis, and they took those books. Most of them were kept. I believe they still exist, or they were destroyed. I think some of them exist at the Vatican. Many were destroyed, and many were copied, actually just rewritten and changed.
Sure.
So, and mysteriously, the originals disappeared, which makes no sense, right? I would say it's very interesting. But the reason our past is very important to us is if you don't know where you come from, you can't know where you're going. So
humanity's in amnesia.
Yeah.
And that's traumatic in all of our subconscious, very deep. It's also, I've said this before, flying through space on a spinning ball where anything can hit you at any time creates trauma deep in the subconscious.
Yes, subconsciously, yes.
Very deep in the subconscious. There's two things being bombarded at us. It's like we don't know our history because it's being hidden from us, and also the lie of flying through space at some stupid speed.
Yeah, it's completely, again, it's that spell of randomness and a vulnerability as
Chaos.
Well. You're not really vulnerable here. We are cradled in the belly of the goddess. Yeah, and the masculine is here too. It shines on us every day and gives us life. So we are in the womb of the mother. The father is here. Everything is okay. Earth is still as dark as it looks sometimes when you look at the way things are. Yes. If you get on the internet or you look at the news, you'll think, oh my God, I live in a hellhole. But go outside, talk to your neighbors.
Talk to the trees.
What do you see? Yeah.
Talk to the ocean.
What do you see in front of you? You're not living in a hellhole.
Yeah.
There is dark stuff going on, but don't get caught up in that. And if you don't know your true or at least more accurate cosmology, and you don't understand that you are cradled and protected and you're important, then you're very easy to control.
This for sure. And also, if you spend your spare time, instead of in nature or contemplating or creativity, you spend it on this sort of deception YouTube channels, really looking at deception, your energy is not going to go up. Your vibration is going to go down.
Right.
Because you'll end up a bit of anger.
Yeah. Well, there is nothing random going on here. And we are not vulnerable as we think, because Earth is under management of higher beings and everything's going to be okay. This is a kind of initiation for humanity. And yeah, when you look at it, it's kind of dark, kind of sucks, but it's not nearly as bad if you just get out in nature, connect with animals, connect with people, learn compassion, heal yourself, and connect to the divine.
Yesterday we picked up a shepherd. He's probably 80. Yeah. And he's never been out of these mountains for like 20, 30 years. He just walks around the mountains with the goat. And he's got such a beauty and spark in his eyes of joy and happiness. He knows the world out there is crazy. He knows the bank's still. He doesn't care for the system at all. And this guy's never been on the internet. And his vibration is flying.
Yeah.
And these guys, I look at him and I think, you probably can't even read. And I think, you're like a mentor to me. It's like a true, wise guy.
Yeah.
I think it's good, before we get into this next section, to talk a little bit about the actual words race and racism. For me, there's like a singular etheric matrix, a family or familiar etheric matrix, an ancestral etheric matrix, then going a step further, a community or town etheric matrix, and then there's like a race or a national etheric matrix. And I know, Era, you speak 3 languages and you've studied word a lot. What are your thoughts on the word and concept of racism?
Okay, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Yes, I speak German, French, and English, and I've lived in Europe for almost 20 years. I've had the opportunity to study languages. I find it really fascinating how languages impact and arise from various streams of human thoughts and modes of consciousness. So basically, race and racism. I mean, we talked earlier about collectivism, and for collectivism to succeed, racial heritage must be devalued. And we see that happening. It's called multiculturalism, but it's not what you think it is. And it's very volatile, isn't it, as a discussion? People are afraid to talk about race, which should tell you something.
Yeah.
When languages organically evolve, new words enter the vocabulary of a language, either because there's a need for it, like there's a new noun, there's a new person, place, or thing that the people that speak this language, they need to name it, or there's something discovered, or due to migration of peoples, you begin to use a different word for the same thing. So it's not really a new word, it's just a different word for something already named. However, in the 20th century, we saw an entirely new phenomenon. It's really interesting. What we saw in the 20th century is that there's been a creation of vocabulary whose sole purpose is to control perception and direct thought. George Orwell spoke about this in his book with Newspeak, right?
Yeah.
And what's really interesting about the word racism is that it did not exist in any language ever that I can find before the 20th century period. Now, we had the word bigot. The first instance of the word bigot appeared in 1660, I think, in French, and then was adopted by the English. And a bigot just describes a person that, dislikes someone else solely because they're from a different, they think differently, or they're from a different group, or whatever.
One example is in Spain, people from South America would be called sudaca, and it's like a derogatory, oh, you're a sudaca.
Right.
And that's bigotry.
Right. And if you look at the evolution of the word racism and the invention of it and how it was used, really, we didn't need the word, because the word racism began to be used and really promoted by the cultural Marxist think tanks that work for the media and feed the media. They're two branches of the same thing.
Tavistock.
Yes, exactly. And by the academics at universities that were and are especially controlled by cultural Marxists. They began to promote the word racism in the 1960s. But again, we didn't need it because we already had the word bigot. Now, there are people here on Earth that are just stupid. And if everyone was the same color, they'd still find something to hate about people. They'd hate you because your feet are too big.
Oh, it's those lot with the blue eyes.
Right.
We don't like them.
So you have to ask yourself, why did they essentially invent the word racism? Now, originally it appeared as the word racialism in 1906. But racialism just referred to, it referred to an awareness of the differences between race. But see, we mentioned earlier collectivism. In order for collectivism to succeed, these differences between race need to disappear so that you can devalue racial heritage and control the people. I'd like to read a quote to you. I find it so eloquent and beautiful. It's from a philosopher currently living named Neil Kramer. And he said, and I hope he doesn't mind me quoting him, but it's on one of his podcasts, and it's on my blog as well. He said it like this, I quote, "In ancient days, there were 5 great tribes on the earth, black, brown, yellow, red, and white. Each arose from the soil of their native continent and were uniquely calibrated in body and mind to resonate with their particular land. As well as the physical landscape, each tribe was born attuned to the finer energies of the region, its heritage, its magic, its sacred teachings, and higher wisdom. Whilst free to move anywhere and connect with any other tribe, that special correspondence of each tribe with its land would always remain enmeshed in their homeland. They were in their true power when they were in harmonious concert with their indigenous atmosphere. And this atmosphere also encompassed the other animals of their realm, the organic cultures and customs of their men and women, their songs, their technologies, and the visions of their wisest sages." And he goes on and says, "Each tribe was very different from one another. They looked different. They smelled different. They walked and talked differently. They were different. They were beautifully contrasting and distinct. The greatest danger to the ascendant path of humanity is to have the different tribes believe that they are all the same, to have their singular skills and insights leveled, to detach each from their heritage and corral them like cattle into a commercial monoculture, to have them fighting among themselves, to have their roots torn and burned, to have their own unequaled glories forgotten. Empire wants a race of gray men."
But that's a great quote by Neil, and I know Neil's worked for many years. But I would say that quote now, with the political correctness agenda, that quote would be called racist by many uneducated people.
Well, they don't even know why they're using the term racist or what it means.
It's been
right?
programmed.
Right, exactly. And so to deny that there are any differences between the races is to deny their unique gifts, actually. And to deny the existence of their uniqueness is ultimately a failure to recognize that God bestowed those gifts. So the way I see it is that God's version of diversity is the true diversity, and it has nothing to do with monocultures. Basically, denying the uniqueness of races, it's turning your nose up at God's artwork.
Yeah, and inversely, that means that as well as acknowledging different races' gifts, we have to be willing to acknowledge each race's shadow and discuss this objectively without fear of becoming a social leper.
And that's why it takes courage to walk the path, because the path requires that we align with truth, even when it means becoming an outcast. So I like to do little thought exercises with myself and challenge myself, especially when I notice I have an emotional or knee-jerk reaction to certain things. And people listening to this may have that. You may feel like, oh, wait a minute.
Where are they going with this?
If you're talking about race, I'm feeling uneasy. Yes, I'm feeling uneasy with this.
That's the time to contemplate. Yeah. What do these words mean to you, and where do these words come from? Are they being used by the elite to stop you saying certain things that maybe need to be said?
Yeah, and to control your perception.
It's got to a point where even if I say to a friend, oh, my ex-Italian girlfriends are all like this, they're like, Mark, you can't generalize like that. I'm like, well, each nation does have a signature energy. Each race does have a signature energy.
Right.
And like, people are starting to call me racist for saying something as calm as,
Yeah.
oh, my ex-Italian girlfriend's always
Yeah.
talked about food.
This is political correctness in newspeak, Orwellian newspeak in action. So here is the intellectual exercise, and it's a spiritual and emotional as well, because you're going to have to brace yourself. Ask yourself a question just to see how you respond to it internally. And the question is this: what if there's no such thing as racism?
So in the true sense of the word, I believe there are different races on this plane. I believe there's the Chinese energy signature. England has its energy signature.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe in races. So if we go literal and really go into the word, that means I believe in racism. And maybe I'm a racist because I believe in races.
Well, that's what they want you to believe, right? Because this word, and all of these words are being used as a means of controlling your thought and your perception by value signaling. So you are a bad person if you acknowledge that not all things are equal, and yet people don't understand there's a difference between equality and equity. Men and women are not equal in that we're not the same, but in equity we have equal value. One is not inherently better than the other along a full spectrum, but one may be better at one thing, whereas another is better at another thing. Let's just ask
It's not
this.
allowed to
Here's
talk
one
about
question.
that now. You can't talk about that
No,
now.
no,
Like, men aren't
exactly.
better than women at anything,
Yeah,
and women aren't better than men at anything.
Well, no, but the feminists want you to believe women are better at everything.
The feminists aren't very feminine, are they?
No, they're not. This is a polarization again. So here's an example, and I just want to point out one thing about the word racism, just to consider it and think about this. You may notice that the word racism, and it's been translated, they use it in French, German, every European language is using this word now. It is basically used to only really against white people, against Europeans. You know, they're even going further with it now and saying it's impossible for anyone to be a racist if they're not white. That really has to raise a few red flags.
Yeah.
That is very alarming. That tells you exactly. Also, the fact that they've evolved the meaning of the word. Originally, they used racism interchangeably with bigotry, which tells you again the word wasn't necessary. We already had the word bigot. We didn't need the word racism unless they specifically wanted to focus on racial devaluation and specifically target one race. Did they do that? Did they want to? Well, what we kind of see, we can tell the tree by its fruit. The word racism is generally used to shut down discourse among white people, not other people, not people of other colors. And we're all, I don't like the term black and white. You said this yesterday. I totally agree. I've said the same thing. You're not black, you're brown.
Yeah, a lot of
I'm
people
kind
who
of
have
peachy,
brown
creamy.
skin. It's weird because a lot of people with brown skin think they've got black skin.
Or they call
And
themselves black. It's a cultural
I'm confused by that.
identification, yeah.
On top of what you just said, Era, is there's a comedian, I forget his name. He's like a mixed race comedian.
Mm-hmm.
And he's very much pushed. He's on the BBC, he's in the Apollo in London, and he's making a lot of jokes about race, and he's basically attacking white people. He's being bigoted
Mm-hmm.
against white people. And if that was inverse, the other way around, with a white comedian, there would be hell breaking loose, probably riots. And I don't know what this agenda is, why this is happening, why it's so out of balance.
They use it when it's convenient to an agenda. For instance, if you acknowledge that most scientists in the West are European. Do you want to use white or European? I don't know. Let's say European.
Let's say European.
They're most European. People call that racism. That's because of racism, right? Because they say the white man holds the dark man down in the field of science.
Yeah.
But if you acknowledge that the NFL in the States, the football league, are 80 or 90% black, oh no, that's not racism.
That's not racism.
But if
that's because they're better. That's because they're better.
But that's right, and that's pragmatic and honest. Some people are better at things than other people. So
yeah, because if you left a lot of black people alone to build a town, with nothing, just left alone, and a group of Chinese people left alone, and a group of European people left alone, the three results would be really different. So what's that? Is that racist? That's a fact. That's
right.
An objective fact.
Right. Well, there's no room for objective reality and objective observation in this particular agenda at all, because it's not objective. It seems to be there is one particular group, which I shall not name, but one particular group that has a real problem with Europeans. And this group controls academia, they control the news, control banks, and control the media. There's a history. You need to research the history. You need to go back a long time, a few thousand years, to understand why. And you also need esoteric knowledge to understand why.
As well.
Yes, yeah. So this is going on, and I can just say I know the subject is very emotional for a lot of people. It's very, very sensitive, but don't be afraid. You cannot be afraid to look at anything. On this path, you have to look at everything.
Sure. No stone can be left unturned. There's a lot of New Agers who've fallen into this sort of very left-wing trap of everyone's equal, and actually adoration for anyone with a different colour skin. It's like, you're even better. Have you come across this before, where if someone's foreign or from another race, they're actually idolised?
Well, this happens even in other lands. I mean, before the 20th century, when you read accounts from local indigenous peoples, there's a lot. You don't get this a lot in the mainstream schooling and mainstream history. They don't want to give you this. They don't want to give you this narrative. Yes, exactly. But that when these pale-skinned people came into these indigenous communities to bring certain knowledge and mathematics, astrology, and so on, they were loved and admired, and they had to be doing something right. I mean, you have a very small percentage of the population where these pale, what they called the indigenous people in their records say were white-skinned people with blonde hair. If they were jerks, they could have just killed them. Yeah, they didn't. They admired them.
This tale's all around the world. It's in the Maya.
And when I go into other cultures, I've traveled extensively to over 20 countries. There's a lot. I fall into that. Like, I'll go into a new culture, and then you have a kind of honeymoon phase with it. And I'm like, they do this so much better. I think the Germans do this so much better than the French. Or I think the Africans do this so much better than the Chinese.
But the Germans do stuff better than the French. Yeah, but we're all like, we just, it's,
yeah. Well, the food, French, though. My French husband kills me because I have to tell you, honey, I lived in Germany for 10 years, and the Germans do better bread. And my husband's like, that's sacrilege. Out, woman, now. We need to separate this agenda on one hand that is telling people that whites are appropriating culture and whites are bad and giving this false narrative of the past. We need to be careful that we don't, it's easy to react to that with anger, to look at some of the stuff they're doing and get angry. There's a website called Red Ice Creations that exposes a lot of this.
They're
I have to be honest.
Angry.
Yeah, and if I look at it, it can make me a little upset. It can trigger me. Oh my God, that's a social justice warrior expression.
Yeah.
I don't want to get triggered.
I actually turned off Red Ice about 2 years ago. I used to listen to it all the time, and I turned it off because they talked about this subject in a way. I wasn't comfortable with the way they talked about it, but I found it in a very angry way.
And yet, I appreciate the work they're doing. I really do. It is needed. I think they're growing. I think if they'll evolve, I think they're kind of moving away from the anger to more like, what can we do about this?
Yeah.
If they'll go even further into the esoteric roots, and Henrik, the guy that started Red Ice, super brilliant guy. I think he is going in that direction. He kind of has that foundation already. But I just have to say, you have to be careful of your reaction to things because, it can piss you off. I understand flat earthers get pissed off.
Yeah.
And when you look at what's going on with this racial agenda, it can piss you off. Yeah. Be careful.
Again, we go back to what we said about awakening. Create time for contemplation,
zoom out.
Creativity. How is my relationships? How am I doing?
Yeah, and watch your emotional reactions.
Yeah.
I feel this is what I think ultimately about gender and race. I'm currently experiencing this reality in this configuration of this body that is feminine and female. I conceive that all of our incarnations are happening at the same time. But let's speak in linear terms. It's easier. I have been male. I've been female. I can go between the two. I embrace being a woman. I don't want to be a man in this life. I embrace the femininity, but I also keep it balanced with masculinity. But I don't over-identify with my gender to the point where I become irrational and unable to objectively observe reality and make observations about what is true. You need to do the same thing with your race. Value your current incarnation. You're of a current race for a reason. There's something to learn from it. Value it. Don't over-identify with it to the point where you lose objectivity.
Yeah. This sort of leads on to the next question, and we're going to go a bit deeper into this subject. It's what do you think, Era, about towns around Europe? We could pick a few in England, such as Burnley, Bradford, Luton, where a lot of Islamic people have come from the Middle East, mainly men between 18 and 35, sort of that tough age. And they've created no-go zones for English whites, and they're living by Sharia law. And in these towns, it has been proven that there has been some grooming of young girls, and girls passed around uncles and cousins for rape and sex. Because these towns, a lot of these towns are no-go zones, and they're creating Sharia law. And a lot of people don't know what Sharia law is, and I'd suggest they look it up, because this is a big subject. What do you think about these towns in Europe where this is happening, and why do you think this is happening?
So that takes me back many hundreds of years, actually, to the last days of Alexandria, the city that Alexander the Great built. People may have heard of the Great Library of Alexandria.
Yeah.
So in the last days of this library and of Alexandria as a city, the Roman Church, the empire, decided to, where they had previously persecuted and suppressed the Christians, they decided to legalize Christianity. Well, they didn't just legalize Christianity, they began to radicalize Christians. They began to send out emissaries around the land and convert what they called barbarians. Okay, so they called them barbarians. They were
Inca priests.
They were, well, this was happening around Egypt, in the Middle East, but also in Europe. They went out, sent emissaries out to convert and radicalize, because they legalized it. So first they were persecuting them, but then they legalized Christianity, and then they radicalized them, and then they used them.
Yeah,
and they used them to destroy what they called paganism. So in Alexandria,
they used it to destroy a lot of feminine magic.
They did. Priesthood. They went after Hypatia. Yeah. Look her up.
All the witches, which were really just
they were the priestess.
Females.
They were the priestess. They knew this is. You have to get all into history. It's a huge subject, but let's keep the thread here. They radicalized these Christians. So legalized. So follow the thread. First from oppression to legalization, to radicalization and converting. Okay, then they used them for their political means. And their agenda was to eradicate so-called paganism, which were actually the descendants of the survivors of Atlantis. Yeah. And there was a large female priestly class that they wanted to eradicate. They used these radicalized Christians in Alexandria to tear down the library, although they took a lot from the library to Rome, and they killed Hypatia. They killed her with seashells. They literally skinned her alive. This is a hateful seed, right? Well, look at that. What happened?
There are parallels to that, to what's happening now around Europe.
Yes. I'm saying that this is not by accident, and the so-called leaders, the forces behind the European Union, have first oppressed Islam through wars, right, and general oppression through geopolitical means. Maybe I shouldn't say Islam. I should say the people, Muslims, people of that region in the Middle East. First they oppress them, then they bring them over when they find that useful, because they can radicalize them and use them for their own purposes. So that's what's happening.
Yeah. What I find interesting, I did some research into Tommy Robinson. Many years ago, he created the EDL, and he's a lad from Luton. He's not a squeaky clean lad. Mm-hmm. He's an English lad. Mm-hmm. He's been in trouble a few times for fighting and stuff. He's not squeaky clean. He moved out of the EDL when a lot of the English football hooligans and bigots got involved. And recently he's done some very intelligent talks, and everyone thinks he's a racist. And I've looked at his talks, and he's not a racist. He's not a bigot.
There's no such thing as a racism.
Let's get rid of that word. They think he's a bigot. They think he's a bigot.
Yeah.
And he's not. And I will talk to anyone live online who thinks Tommy Robinson's a bigot. And what I found really interesting, and the reason why I've started looking into this subject, is because I found out the state have been trying to get to Tommy Robinson. They took his house. They put him in jail, with Muslims. They thought they were going to kill Tommy Robinson. Mm-hmm. They've really tried to shut Tommy Robinson down. And this is from the top. This is judges, the police, and empire, the elite. And this is what made me very interested in this subject. And what I find really interesting, I'll put to you, is why do you think these indigenous people around Luton, Bradford, Burnley, around Europe, around these towns, why do you think they're just standing by and letting this happen?
2 reasons. 1, fear. And second, they've lost connection to their land and their tradition.
I think these are good reasons. Yeah, I think fear's there. I mean, Toby Robinson touched on this. People have mortgages and a boss. And these things, if these things get cut, either of these things get cut, they're on the streets.
Yeah. Well, there's also power that comes through the land to each indigenous people that live on that land.
The power's gone in England.
Well, the Roman Church built their temples on top of the sacred points, and so without that connection to the land, it neuters the people.
It neutralizes.
It definitely
the area
does.
magically.
There are a group of people in England that are doing a lot of work around Glastonbury and other areas, magical work. But again, if you try to understand the world, this reality purely from a physical perspective, you'll never get it. If you try to understand the current socioeconomic patterns
from books,
just from the news, or just from that, without esoteric understanding, the root of the esoteric reasons behind it, you're lost. So I would just say to anybody listening to this, go do some research on alternative historians, especially great ones from Russia, because they're not as
Secret History of the World. Is that Jonathan Black?
Yeah, that book, so maybe there's some good stuff in that.
It's good for people new to esoteric history.
Yeah, look, there's a YouTube channel actually called New Earth, and I think at least she speaks Russian. She's not Russian. It's called New Earth, all written together, and she does a 50-part series on our true history, and it's absolutely excellent. She does a really good job. She's synthesizing a lot of the Russian research and translating it because it's not currently available in English.
There's been stories in England, Blackpool and Rotherham, where these Islamic towns, which they are now, the road names are Islamic, they've actually groomed and raped a lot of young girls under Sharia law, because this is okay under Sharia law.
Yeah.
And if some English lads sort of walk down the street and say, we're not very happy with this, they're treated as bigots. And a lot of left-wing people come out and throw bottles at them, and there's a big standoff.
It's insanity. Yeah, but this is all being done also. From the heights that this is being orchestrated, it's about creating chaos and polarization.
Totally.
Again, polarization. You can get people on extreme ends of the spectrum. It's not about who's right or who's wrong. It's about that polarization. As long as you can keep people in that state, it's so easy to control them. Yeah. Totally. This is the one area where Red Ice just needs to up their game a little bit. They're getting very polarized, and I'm seeing from the alt-right some very disturbing streams of thought coming through. One has to do with women, so I think maybe we should wait and talk about this in another. Yeah, the whole female. Yeah, because that's a whole other huge subject. But it does link a little bit to this Islamic growth around white European towns. Yeah. Now, I don't have a problem with anyone with any colour skin going anywhere. I'm all about freedom of movement. No, we go to India, right? I mean, when people bring a toxic ideology into another place, and when the government supports it, that's the most important thing. Yeah, when there's a hidden hand behind it, then we have to take stock and look at it. And this is a very sensitive subject because people get very nervous, and the word race and racism come up in people's minds. I read the most wonderful quote the other day, and I think we could almost end it on that and let people decide for themselves, because we don't want to convince anybody of anything here. Sure. But the quote was basically, the greatest success of cultural Marxism has been to convince Europeans or people of white, that it is immoral for them to love and support their own race. Totally, yeah. This is a very powerful quote. So to round off, really, I want to talk very little bit about what I'm calling factions within this elite or Illuminati, what people are calling the Illuminati or elite or empire. People are just calling it one thing, elite, empire. But I'm starting to see within that there are factions, and they're moving against each other within the elite. So it could be some factions within the elite want Flat Earth to come out. I mean, it's in plenty of TV and videos and movies. But there are factions still supporting NASA. Also with the shootings and the hoaxes, a lot of these ISIS hoaxes and shooting hoaxes in America, there could be factions creating that and other factions showing the videos of how stupid they are. Also with this migration around Europe, there could be a faction pushing that and another faction working against that.
I mean, we could go into deep conjecture and say maybe the other Varshas in the Vedic cosmology, there are gangs or factions at play in this reality from other Varshas within the Vedic reality. So it's all very simple to call it the elite or the Illuminati or Empire, but within that bubble, there could be many factions working against each other. What would you say about that, Era?
I would say when you look at it from that perspective, it does seem like we're kind of in a video game for idiots. There's a lot going on, and we're never going to know all of it. Although certain prophets, the word apocalypse just means unveiling, and the Bible does say that everything will be revealed. So I think we have to understand everything that's important to us will be revealed, but only to those who have the eyes to see. This is going on. It seems like a lot of different things that are contradictory, although behind that there may be even a greater, again, about distortion, confusion. You get people, some focused on flat earth, some focused on NASA, some focused on new age stuff, some focused on racial issues, whatever. The problem is everybody's putting their focus there. When are you putting your focus on yourself, your growth, your evolution in nature, and your own divinity? When are you doing that? So, yeah, like you said, it looks like there's a lot of crazy stuff and different factions and whatnot, but I don't want to spend my time on the internet sorting shit from truth.
Yeah.
I'm not willing to have my consciousness hijacked that way or give my time doing that and trying to figure it out.
Because we're not going to figure it out.
We're not going to, so
it'll be revealed organically to certain people.
Right, not even to everyone.
Yeah.
And I can only encourage everyone to really think about the desire you have to try to wake other people up, because using that term at face value, maybe some people can't wake up, and you're not really being kind trying to wake them up.
Sure.
So focus on yourself again.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a selfish way. I want to clarify that. When you focus on your growth and your evolution and walk your path,
it automatically helps people around you.
You're doing so much for humanity. Know your power.
It helps everyone around you.
And you are much more, Empire knows that you are much more powerful when you're walking your path than when you're busy trying to figure out conspiracy theories. So they love to keep you in that.
Getting into debates on Facebook or YouTube, massive 100 comment threads of arguments and debate.
Yeah.
Okay, Era, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I really like Era's work, and where can we find your work and other stuff, Era?
Yeah, I have a blog called Era Denmark. The website address is www.era, this ERA -Denmark.org. I couldn't get a .com. I have a blog. I don't do a lot of stuff. I write or record monologues when I feel inspired. And if you want to contact me, my email address is on there, and be happy to hear from you.
I'm really glad to see a wise female voice in this sort of swamp of male ego, should we say.
It's very kind of you.
That's okay.
I really enjoy all the men and the work they're doing. I get a lot. I really enjoyed your work on cataclysm and your work on the Vedic astrology. It's something I had looked into, but you did a great documentary. And I think, again, us women and men, we need to be coming together, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.